I'm on a Saturday afternoon after lunch doing a presentation. I couldn't be in a more enviable spot on the schedule. I think I'm going to, I don't know, somebody said something about doing 20 minutes of something and then having a bunch of questions. So I promise I'm not going to be very long, I don't think. Much of what you heard from Nick Will was kind of interesting, so I kind of feel that kind of segues into mine a whole lot. So that's where we are here. We just do this, yes. So this is what I call an overture to our webinar series, which is entitled Effective Litigation of, actually it should be Family Law Cases with Parental Alienation. Although I'm presenting it, Dr. Bone and I created an organization, I guess it's hard to believe, maybe 2 years ago. That's unbelievable. Called the National Association of Parental Alienation Specialists. I really like it because it's a National Association of PAS, right? Interesting. So why did we do this? Well, I found myself doing testimony in all over the country, and for some period of time, attorneys would, in front of the court, say, is there a certifying organization on this topic called parent alienation? Judges would turn to me and say, is there a certifying organization? And I guess after about the 12th time, I called Mike and I said, you know, I got an idea. So what we thought we were doing, and what we want to do, is basically create an organization that would provide training for not only mental health professionals, but our first target, frankly, were attorneys. We're kind of looking at how we get this out to them. Because if an attorney doesn't know about parent alienation and goes against an attorney that does, it turns out to be a pretty big disaster for the rejected parent. One other thing that we thought we would do too is create a referral source. So parents call Dr. Bone mostly. I get some calls occasionally, but they call us and they say, well, do you know anybody who knows about parent alienation? Can you send us to an attorney or a mental health professional? And unfortunately, there's so few people that we can send people to help them. I will routinely ask either a group of attorneys or I will get an attorney who's going to hire me for doing expert witness work, and I will say, ask the attorney on the phone, have you ever heard of adverse childhood experiences? And I can tell you almost universally, the answer is no. And it's like, okay, this person's going to take on a case of parent alienation and doesn't really know the significance of what they're dealing with. That's mind-boggling. We also wanted to create a place where we'd have a resource for people to come to and look at research, look at articles. I mean, there's plenty of those around, but we thought we would kind of be another place, a one-stop stopping kind of thing. One-stop stopping, one-stop shopping. So we created a program. There are 11 modules in our program. Each module runs about 75 minutes. And if you do the math, it's approved by the Florida bar at this point for 16.5 continuing legal education credits. I am a provider of continuing education for psychologists through the American Psychological Association, and I find this is really fascinating for those who are kind of interested in the APA and parent alienation correlation. When I put my application in to become an approved sponsor, can you imagine what course I would put in to get approved by the American Psychological Association? This one. So the American Psychological Association has approved all of my trainings over the years, and I think I've been approved for like 15 years now. They have approved every one of the courses that I've submitted for consideration for APA credit on the topic of parental alienation.
Great.
So my first module, you all were sent a pretty detailed outline of each of the modules. And if anybody didn't for some reason, because their email didn't give it to them or they came in late or something, get in touch with me and I'll be happy to send it back out to you. But real quickly, the modules look, Module 1, we talk about the terms, the terminology. Rejected parent, favorite parent, alienated parent, that type of thing. People need a common vocabulary when we're talking about this phenomenon. One of the things that's fascinating, we find it in courtrooms all the time, is the whole question of how in the world can something like this happen? It goes beyond belief in many cases, and because it's so counterintuitive, it doesn't make a lot of sense to judges, to mental health professionals. How can you have a child who has a loving relationship with both parents, wake up one day, because it doesn't always happen in one day, all of a sudden is now rejecting a parent? It just doesn't make any sense. So they look for logic in it. What do? They look to blame the rejected parent. Not all the time. We have some people running around the country talking about hybrid cases where, both parents are at fault. That comes under the category, and this is really dangerous, this comes under the category of high conflict divorces. High conflict connotes two people are doing something. And yeah, both two people are doing something. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we're talking about human beings. And they both screw up. They all make mistakes. Every one of us does. What happens with a rejected parent, and the other piece too, when I decided to do this, I'm thinking, boy, talk about preaching to the choir. The rejected parent gets angry, they get frustrated. They're stopped and stymied by the legal system. The legal system moves like molasses moving up a hill. We have, in our country, what we do, and I don't know if this is true in other countries, but many of our cases in court don't just go in a continuous process until it's done. It's Monday of March something, we'll have a hearing, and then maybe it'll be June, there'll be another 2 or 3 days, and then July there'll be 2 or 3 more days, and then, oh, by the way, this judge gets transferred out because they're not coming off the family bench, they go into criminal, we get a new judge in. What does the alienating parent do? They're not stupid. When they get close to, looks like this thing is not going to go their way, they dump their attorney. Now we start all over again with a new attorney. So this whole question of how does this happen? We talk about in our program the physiology of a child is really kind of geared for this thing to happen, interestingly enough. Why? Well, when we send a kid to elementary school when they're 6 years old, their neurological system is geared to learn. They're going to take in new information. Well, what happens with parental alienation is the child's going to be getting new information about the other parent. So neurologically, they're set up to do this, okay? What happens is there's not a counter force to it that helps unbalance or balance the whole thing. We heard about attachment. Oh, I'll mention this again maybe later. But one of the things in attachment theory is Bowlby back in 1965, okay, wrote an article about the disruption of attachment and the effects that it has on children. In 1965, what's fascinating is fast forward to what we know about adverse childhood experiences, he predicted exactly what we're finding in adverse childhood experiences. That is, I get so excited about that, where's Steve Moore? I don't see him, there he is. I keep saying, did you know that, Steve? We talk about parenting. We talk about what needs to happen in a parenting relationship. What are the good things? What's the purpose of parenting? Those kinds of things. Obviously we go into in depth with attachment theory. We believe also that you don't break an attachment. It just gets covered up, it gets blocked, it gets blurred. We just have to find a way to reestablish that link. Module 2, we talk about misperception. We talked a little bit about it in the first module. Children's misperception. Human beings misperceive what's going on. Okay, one of the things that I testify to frequently is the idea that human communication is 7% words, 93% tone of voice, facial expression, and body language. So I can say I love you a whole bunch of different times and mean very different things. And so you'll have an alienating parent will say, Well, I encourage the relationship all the time. How do you do it? How do you communicate it? We talk about parent alienation, not alienating, we talk about parent alienation, and we talk about parent alienation syndrome. The world wants to make a big distinction about that, okay? We talk about probability and prevalence of alienation. The literature, what they show, everything from Cowher and Rivlin talking about 85, 86% of their cases had some elements of parent alienation, to other people who talk different levels of alienation. We talk about the history, obviously going back to Gardner, going back before Gardner, and somebody was nice enough to say there was a parentectomy that came out in 1930. I'm going to include that. Thank you very much for sharing that. I didn't know that. Module 3, we talk about the Lucifer effect. We have a social psychologist in here. Most people should have heard of Philip Zimbardo. Zimbardo is the one that wrote the book called The Lucifer Effect. How is it that good people do bad things? Well, we live in social systems. So he talks about the significance of the environment, how that affects our behavior. And we don't really appreciate how much we are controlled by our environment, by how we're influenced by our environment. And so you have a family that's in the process of getting a divorce, and that's a little system. Well, that system, at some point in time, finds itself in the legal system. And the legal system that overlaps it, and the legal system is got its issues about how it deals with that family. And so you see the behavior starts to get influenced by the intersection of these systems. We don't have to make a big point out of it other than understand that we're just not out there by ourselves, that we're really influenced by a lot of things. We also talk about Amy Baker's 17 strategies. I came from a case last week in Rochester, New York, and I found out that opposing psychologists came up and told me that Amy Baker and Linda were pre-science. There's really no such thing as parent alienation. This guy Evans is really all crazy and wet. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Module 4, brainwashing techniques. Pretty much some of the things out of children held hostage, some of the things that we know in terms of how to influence children's behavior in a bad way, if you will. I mentioned parenting, and the whole role of parenting, in this previous module, the whole role of parenting is to teach children, right, how to have relationships, how to survive in this world, how to be a good person, moral, values, etc. And what we see with alienation and alienating behaviors on the part of parents is that it's kind of a pathological parenting. I hate to say that word, but that's what it is. In that we're teaching kids the wrong things and how not to be what we want them to be. And we are seeing intergenerational, transgenerational kinds of issues coming up where if a parent has been a victim, interestingly, a victim of alienation, they're increasing the likelihood that they'll be an alienator. Isn't that interesting? Abuse statistics. We talk about abuse statistics. Can you always believe the children? Okay, what we find in these cases is that children are giving all kinds of reports to therapists, to some cases they go in and talk to judges, which I'm very much against that, but judges sometimes do that. Can you believe children? So there's a whole work of Stephen Cece's work in terms of the reliability of children's testimony. We cover that quite a bit. All of these programs, by the way, are recorded. They're videos themselves, and they use videos in it. I'm going to show you one that we have in a few minutes. It's really kind of fun. We talk about abuse statistics, because what happens in these cases, it used to be, and somebody said this earlier, it used to be that physical abuse and sex abuse allegations used to come in at some point in the case. The case would get escalated to where it would start including those allegations. Now, it's almost straight out of the box. They started throwing in the physical and the sex abuse right off the bat. Well, we have to look at what those statistics are. What's the likelihood that a child has been abused? And we have to be careful, because we don't want to say, well, we don't believe children are abused. Of course children are abused. But what's the statistical probability And how is the statistical probability in this case? I don't know how many times I've had a parent who was in Europe, and while he was gone, they filed a Department of Child Protection complaint against him because he was physically abusing a child. And they, of course, in Florida, our child protection people, they jump right on it, okay? And this guy comes back from Europe and he almost got arrested. And it was like, why? Well, you were abusing your kid. He says, why? I was in Europe. My kid's over here. It's that absurd in some of the cases. How do you detect parent alienation? We talk about the signs and the symptoms, both from what the behavior is in terms of the perpetrator, if you will, the alienating parent. How does the rejected parent react? How do they behave? They have a reaction to it, obviously. We talk about the phenomenon of alienation in terms of it's an internal deterioration as well as an external deterioration of the child's relationship, the child's beliefs, the child's processing. And again, I apologize, I know I'm preaching to this choir here. Module 5, we talk about false allegations of abuse. What do they look like? What's the statistical probabilities, etc. Deteriorating relationships between the child and the targeted parent. We talk about what that looks like. We talk about fear. It's a fear reaction. What we believe is that the child is actually afraid of the alienating parent. They've already exorcised, if you will, one parent from their lives. Now they're left with the parent that they have a favored relationship with. We very frequently see that there's a fear reaction in that child relative to the favored parent. Of course, we all know the 8 symptoms, the levels of severity, mild, moderate, severe. We make a distinction between estrangement and alienation. We talked about biases. Someone mentioned that. We're going to talk about that. We teach attorneys how to spot some of the symptoms of a bias. What do you need to do to counter or protect against the bias? Biases are there, okay? We just have to make sure that we can identify or protect ourselves against it. Multiple hypotheses, multiple sources of information. Keep coming back. The inverted triangle that you showed is a really good way to teach that. These are some of the biases that are in the literature. And you always hear the last one. I mean, you hear it from judges, you hear it from lawyers, you hear it from psychologists who don't want to make a decision on this issue. Will come in and they'll tell you, you know, the truth is somewhere in between. No, it isn't. Consequences of alienation. People do not really appreciate. The courts don't appreciate it. The mental health community, to a large extent, don't appreciate the true consequences of alienation. We're talking the work out of the adverse childhood experience literature that really is just devastating to kids for the rest of their lives, neurologically, physically, medically, psychologically. We talk about the treatment programs. This is just an introduction to the treatment programs. The next slide we'll talk about, we get into each of the known programs that are at least advertising that they're effective. Some of them I know are, some of them I'm not sure of. We also talk very much about why traditional therapy doesn't work and counseling doesn't work. It exacerbates the problem almost 100% of the time. I'm almost hesitant to say almost. Overview of existing programs. And then here are the programs that we talk about in some kind of depth. Yes, I know all about Family Reflections, is not taking any new clients. We kind of put this in because we wanted to give Kathleen or Ray some recognition and respect. When we talk about the other programs that we know about. Module 10, we talk about human memory. Strategies for attorneys who are representing the rejected parent, strategies for attorneys who are representing the favored parent, and then some ideas for judges. This was a paper done by, or come out of one of the works of Richard Warshak. We share some of those thoughts, plus we've edited and elaborated on some of them. The role of experts. Many attorneys do not understand how to use experts in their different roles. And so that's what we're trying to help them understand. Obviously, they know about guardian ad litem. They know about mediation. They know about custody evaluator. But they're not sure in some of the other ones. So it's kind of interesting. So we go into those types of roles. What I wanted to show, how do I get out? How do we go to my movie? One of the people that we talked about, oh, there it is. Okay, I don't want to start it. One of the people that we talk about, how many people have heard of Kang Lee? Oh, good. Excellent. So this is new data for you. So we talk about children, we talk about children's reliability of testimony, and you will hear testimony by psychologists, mental health workers, family therapists. They know the kid's telling the truth. There's absolutely no question about it. And well, how do you know? Well, the story's consistent. Okay, they have really good eye contact with this kid, so I really know this kid's telling the truth. So this is one of the videos that we use in our program, and I'm biased. It's really good.
Hi. Let me ask the audience a question. Did you ever lie as a child? If you did, could you please raise your hand? Wow, this is the most honest group of people I've ever met. So for the last 20 years, I've been studying how children learn to tell lies. And today, I'm going to share with you some of the discoveries we have made. But to begin, I'm going to tell you a story from Mr. Richard Messina, who is my friend and the elementary school principal. He got a phone call one day. The caller says, Mr. Messina, my son Johnny will not come to school today because he's sick. Mr. Messina asks, who am I speaking to, please? And the caller says, I am my father. So this story sums up very nicely 3 common beliefs we have about children and lying. 1, children only come to tell lies after entering elementary school. 2, children are poor liars. We adults can easily detect their lies. And 3, if children lie at a very young age, there must be some character flaws with them. And they are going to become pathological liars for life. Well, it turns out all the 3 beliefs are wrong. So we have been playing guessing games with children all over the world. So here's an example. So in this game, we ask children to guess the numbers on the cards. And we tell them, if they win the game, they are going to get a big prize. But in the middle of the game, we make an excuse and leave the room. And before we leave the room, we tell them not to peek at the cards. Of course, we have hidden cameras in the room to watch their every move. Because the desire to win the game is so strong, more than 90% children will peek as soon as we leave the room. The crucial question is, when we return and ask the children whether or not they have peeked, will the children who peeked confess or lie about their transgression? We found that regardless of gender, country, religion, at 2 years of age, 30% lie, 70% tell the truth about their transgression. At 3 years of age, 50% lie, and 50% tell the truth. At 4 years of age, more than 80% lie. And after 4 years of age, most children lie. So as you can see, lying is really a typical part of development. And some children begin to tell lies as young as 2 years of age. So now let's take a closer look at the younger children. why some but not all young children lie. As in cooking, you need good ingredients to cook good food. And good lying requires two key ingredients. The first key ingredient is theory of mind, or the mind-reading ability. Mind-reading is the ability to know that different people have different knowledge about the situation, and the ability to differentiate between what I know and what you know. Mind-reading is important for lying is because the basis of lying is that I know, you don't know what I know. Therefore, I can lie to you. The second key ingredient for good lying is self-control. It is the ability to control your speech, your facial expression, and your body language, so that you can tell a convincing lie. And we found that those young children who have more advanced mind reading and self-control abilities tell lies earlier and are more sophisticated liars. As it turns out, these two abilities are also essential for all of us to function well in our society. And in fact, deficits in mind reading and self-control abilities are associated with serious developmental problems such as ADHD and autism. So, if you discover your 2-year-old is telling his or her first lie, instead of being alarmed, you should celebrate. Because it signals that your child has arrived at a new milestone of typical development. Now, are children poor liars? Do you think you can easily detect their lies? Would you like to give it a try? Yes? Okay. So I'm going to show you 2 videos. In the videos, the children are going to respond to a researcher's question, did you peek? So try to tell me which child is lying and which child is telling the truth. So here's child number 1. Are you ready?
Did you peek? No.
And this is child number 2.
Did you peek? No.
The first one lied.
Okay. If you think child number 1 is lying, please raise your hand. If you think child number 2 is lying, please raise your hand. Okay, so as a matter of fact, child number 1 is telling the truth. Child number 2 is lying. Looks like many of you are terrible detectives of children's lies. Now, we have played similar kind of games with many adults from all walks of life. And we show them many videos. In half of the videos, the children lied. In the other half of the videos, children told the truth. And let's find out how these adults perform. Because there are as many liars as truth tellers. So if you guess randomly, there's 50% chance you're going to get it right. So if your accuracy is around 50%, it means you are terrible detectors of children's lies. Okay, so let's start with undergrads and law school students who typically have limited experience with children. No, they cannot detect children's lies. Their performance is around chance. Now, how about social workers and child protection lawyers who work with children on a daily basis? Can they detect children's lies? No, they cannot. What about judges, custom officers, and police officers who deal with liars on a daily basis? Can they detect children's lies? No, they cannot. What about parents? Can parents detect others' children's lies?
I think so.
No, they cannot. What about, can parents detect their own children's lies? No, they cannot. So now you may ask, why children's lies are so difficult to detect? So let me illustrate this with my own son, Nathan. So this is his facial expression when he lies. So when children lie, their facial expression is typically neutral. However, behind this neutral expression, the child is actually experiencing a lot of emotions, such as fear, guilt, shame, and maybe a little bit of liar's delight. Unfortunately, such emotions are either fleeting or hidden, therefore is mostly invisible to us. So in the last 5 years, we have been trying to figure out a way to reveal these hidden emotions. Then we made a discovery. We know that underneath our facial skin, there's a rich network of blood vessels. When we experience different emotions, our facial blood flow changes subtly. And these changes are regulated by the autonomic system that is beyond our conscious control. So by looking at facial blood flow changes, we can reveal people's hidden emotions. Unfortunately, such emotion-related facial blood flow changes are too subtle to detect by our naked eye. So to help us reveal people's facial emotions, we have developed a new imaging technology we call transdermal optical imaging. To do so, we use a regular video camera to record people when people experience various hidden emotions. And then, using our image processing technology, we can extract transdermal images of facial blood flow changes. And by looking at transdermal video images, now we can easily see transdermal facial blood flow changes associated with various hidden emotions. And using this technology, we can now reveal the hidden emotion associated with lying and therefore detect people's lies. We can do so non-invasively, remotely, inexpensively, with an accuracy at about 85%, which is far better than chance learning. And in addition, we discovered a Pinocchio effect. No, not this Pinocchio effect. This is the real Pinocchio effect. When people lie, the facial blood flow on the cheeks decreases, and the facial blood flow on the nose increases. Of course, lying is not the only situation that will evoke our hidden emotions. So then we ask ourselves, in addition to detecting lies, how can our technology be used? One application is in education. For example, using this technology, we can help this mathematics teacher to identify the student in his classroom who may experience high anxiety about the topic he's teaching so that he can help him. And also we can use this in healthcare. For example, every day I Skype my parents who live thousands of miles away. And using this technology, I can not only find out what's going on in their lives, but also simultaneously monitor their heart rate, their stress level, their mood, and whether or not they are experiencing pain. And perhaps in the future, there are risks for heart attack or hypertension. And you may ask, can we use this also to reveal politicians' emotions? For example, during a debate. Well, the answer is yes. Using TV footages, we could detect the politicians' heart rate, mood, and stress, and perhaps in the future, whether or not they are lying to us. We can also use this in marketing research. For example, to find out whether or not people like certain consumer products. We can even use it in dating. So for example, if your date is smiling at you, this technology can help you to determine whether she actually likes you or she's just trying to be nice to you. And in this case, she's just trying to be nice to you. So transdermal optical imaging technology is at the very early stage of development. Many new applications will come about that we don't know today. However, one thing I know for sure is that lying will never be the same again. Thank you very much.
that was just kind of a demonstration of some of the things. Our programs are loaded with videos. They're 75 minutes, so they are pretty compact, given the topic that we cover, the breadth of topics, the whole idea. We do Loftus's studies and presentations that she does, Stephen Cece's work. There's Philip Zimbardo's thing on the Lucifer effect. There's a lot about his prison study, and he talks a lot about the social implications of our human behavior. And then he goes on to other things. There's other one. He has a couple of other studies that he's done and that he narrates too for older research, Milgram's stuff, that type of thing. So, and all of these things play a role in terms of how these kids are getting manipulated to reject a parent. So, where are we in time? Anybody know what time is
It's
it?
3:37.
Okay.
Got time for questions?
Yeah.
I don't believe in questions, I'm sorry.
Are you allowed to tell the truth?
Yes, please.
This is a phenomenal program. I'm wondering two things.
Thank you.
One, have you approached other states besides Florida to get this approved for the continuing education of lawyers outside?
Funny you should ask. I just sent the application to, there's an attorney in Idaho who had a very bad car accident, and he's falling way behind in his CLEs. And I sent him basically the program, and he then asked me, he said, they're not going to accept Florida bar's approval, could I? So I just sent off the application to Idaho. I've been approved, Mike and I have been approved over the years from California to New York in other programs, not this one in particular, but other programs. So it's really not a hard, it's just a little bit of time-consuming process to get approved. It's simple.
And the second question I had, we had a presentation earlier about what was necessary to get people to accept unsolicited information.
It was so appropriate for us, it's unbelievable. We meet 2 of the 3 criteria. Unfortunately, we don't meet
Let
the
me
ones.
finish my question.
I'm sorry.
That was really just
I was
the setup.
anticipating.
That was just the setup. What I'm wondering is, if you have, so this is being done currently as continuing education, have you approached anybody in a law school to get this to be part of the training of family lawyers as they're going through their initial law training? Because they're going to accept something from a professor in a different way than they'll accept someone as a continuing education.
The answer is no, I haven't done that. I think that's a great idea, A. B, I'm concerned about the familiarity and the trustworthiness in terms of me not having a lot of credentials with a law school. So I think it's a great idea. I'd love to do it. I don't know, the law school curriculum is, they're 16, this is 16 and a half hours. So that's a tough thing to bite into. Now, we do have it broken up by individual.
There's 13 million people in America that are being affected by this. Certainly 16 and a half hours would be well worth it.
We're part of the choir. I am telling you that we are having a lot of difficulty we can't give this away to attorneys.
You know what, you guys need to read the book, People of the Lie by Greg.
Oh, I remember that book.
And that book answers it
I'm
all.
familiar with it.
Yeah.
We just said, we'll try and push it in our states,
Well,
absolutely.
I encourage that wholeheartedly.
Well, it's a
You
matter
go to
of-
our website, it's naops.com. Please push it. If you're California,
No, I'm Connecticut, she's Tennessee.
I'm Maryland.
if you let me know, I will go to those bars and get approval.
Okay, and to really more, once we tell them there's CEUs available, how, and make it, and we can find a way to make it almost mandatory, which is difficult, but.
I like that.
Yes.
Send me an
Because
email.
as far as I'm concerned, anybody in the family court should be trained in this.
I-
They shouldn't be allowed to work in the family court without this.
I love
You
it.
should get Trump to approve this.
Send me an email with the states that you want me to, you guys, I'll do it. I'll be happy to do it.